Hello guys, I hope you're all doing really well. Welcome to my new series on the CodeLab channel called Advanced CSS. Now in this series we're going to be using CSS properties which are a bit more on the advanced side to help us create cool animated content for our projects so we can turn our static projects into more dynamic ones using just HTML and CSS. Now in this week's video we're going to be looking at two different ways we can create an animated search bar for our projects. So if you look over here in the browser, we've got our two examples. So they both first display an icon with a rounded background. But the difference in the two is how they're styled to create the animation. So the first one has a hover effect. So if I hover over this icon, you see now it expand and show us the search bar, and the icon actually changes color as well as its background changing color. And then if I hover over this, it will revert back to its original state, which I think is a pretty cool animation for our projects, and it's actually quite simple to achieve this design. Now the second one is similar at first glance, so it shows us the icon as well as the rounded background, but this one we actually have to click to expand it. So we'll click on it and you'll see it expand and show us the search bar, and then to close this off to its original state we click back on the search bar. So two different designs, whichever one you feel looks better and more appropriate you can use in your projects. So with that all out of the way, let's get straight into it. So I'm just going to close this off a little bit. So the first thing we need is Font Awesome because we've got icons. So in the browser here I've searched Font Awesome CDN, and I'm going to click on the first link, and then we'll scroll down, and in the first version here I'm going to copy this link tag and just paste it underneath here. And then what I want to do is link my style sheet, so style.css. So this is a blank HTML document, and I'm just going to open this up with live server so we have a fresh page. So the first thing I'm going to do from here is I'm just going to paste the H1 from the original document. You guys don't have to do this, I'm just doing this for consistency and just save us a bit of time. Now the next thing we need is a flex container, just so we can center all our content in the middle. So both the search bars are going to be inside this flex container class now. So now we're just going to write out the HTML markup for the first search bar. So I'm going to put a comment here saying example 1. And I'm just going to put a heading in here too for example 1. Again, you guys don't have to do this. This is just for consistency. So the first thing I need is just a div with a class of search bar. And this is going to house two other elements. So first the input and then the div for the icon. So we're going to put an input in here. And it's going to be a type of text. And then we're going to have a placeholder. And what this attribute does is any value we put in here will appear inside the input. So I'm going to put in here what are you looking for. Now this will appear inside the input, which you can see in the browser now. Now underneath that we're just going to have a div with a class of icon, which of course is going to be our icon. And to get that search, to get that magnifying glass icon, it's going to be I for the icon tag. So .fas.fa/search. Hit enter, and then you'll be able to see our little icon there in the browser. So that's pretty much it for the HTML markup. All we need to do now is just style this. So I'm going to go in the style sheet here, and the first thing I'm going to do is just set some global styles. So we use the asterisk, which selects every element, and I'm going to say margin 0. So basically remove all the margin and padding. Set the box size and property to border box, and then I'm just going to grab the body tag, and I want to give this the background color of that color from the original document. So this is a light slate gray. So that's the same as the original. And then the next thing I want to do for the global styles is just give the H1s a color of white. Again, you don't have to do this. This is again just for consistency. So font size as well, make them a bit bigger, so 40 pixels. Now the next thing I want to do is center my content. So I want to put it in the center of the browser. So we're going to be using Flexbox for that. So we're going to grab the div of the class of flex container. And the first thing I want to do is just set the height of this to be 100 viewport height, so it spans across the whole height of the browser. And then the next thing I want to do is first set the display value to flex, so we initiate Flexbox. If you guys are interested in learning about Flexbox, I do have a bite-sized tutorial series which goes a lot more in depth about the next few properties I'm about to lay out. So currently right now when we display flex, all the elements inside the flex container will go into a row, which is why you see them stack up next to each other. So to put them again on top of each other, we need the flex direction property and put this in a column, so they now go on top of each other. Now when we set the flex direction to column, the alignment properties switch roles, so justify content, which usually works horizontally, becomes vertical, and then line items becomes horizontal from vertical. So to show you guys what I mean, align items will align this horizontally in the center, so you see it move to the center of the page. And then justify content will now align this to the center of the web page vertically. So as mentioned, when you set this to column, these two properties switch roles. So we've sent it to all our content now. So the next thing we want to do is start styling the search bar. So I'm going to grab the div of the class of search bar, and I'm going to say, let's give this a background of white. You guys can color these however you like. This is just for the example I have done. So I want to give a bit of height to this as well. So say 60 pixels. I want to give some margin between the heading and the search bar. So I'm going to say margin 60 pixels. And then I want to put rounded edges, so border radius of say 30 pixels. And then I want to set a transition on here, so our content, our animation is nice and smooth. And then what I want to do is just center all this content with Flexbox in the middle of the search bar, or the div of the search bar. So again, we use Flexbox, so display flex. So this Flexbox is really good at centering your content. And we're going to say justify content center, align items to the center, and that should put all our content in the middle. So nice and centered there. Now the next thing I want to do is style this input. So basically you want to remove all the default styling. So we're going to say search bar, input, and first I want to remove the background. So I'm going to say transparent, get rid of the border. So we're going to say none. And when we click on this, you can see it creates an outline. We want to get rid of that outline. So say outline none, that should remove the outline. And then again, just want to set a transition here so the animation is smooth, so 0.8 seconds. Set the cursor to a pointer, and then make the font size a bit bigger, so say 18 pixels. And then the last thing I want to do is just make the width of this initially to be 0 pixels, so we can't see it at first. So all we can see right now is the icon. Now let's style the actual icon. So we're going to go underneath this, and it's got the div of icon. Set this to a display of flex to, because we want to center the icon in the middle. So justify content to the center, align items to the center. So it's really easy to center content with Flexbox. That's why it's so powerful. And then the font size. So if you want to increase the size of an icon, you do it with font size, not with width and height. So let's say 40 pixels here. So that should increase the size of the icon. And then give it a bit of breathing room from the content and the outside. So padding 10 pixels. And there you go, give us a bit of breathing room. So that's pretty much it for the icon. So we're pretty much almost there. All we want to do now is essentially just add the hover effect. So when we hover over this, it will give us that smooth transition. So I'm going to go and grab this, paste it underneath here, and we want to set the hover effect on the search bar because we can't initially see the input, otherwise this hover effect wouldn't work. So we want to set the hover on the search bar, and we want to set the width of this then to be about whatever you want, but let's just say 400 pixels. And I want to add some padding left to the input as well, so we can see it a bit more, 10 pixels. And now if we hover over this, you see we get that nice smooth animation, so it looks pretty good. And that's all it really takes to create this animation. So really simple, but really effective, and looks pretty cool. And all I really need to do now is just style the icon on the hover. So I'm going to go underneath the icon here, and I'm going to grab the search bar hover, and then grab the icon div. So when we hover over this, the background we want to be, let's say, I think it's a 333, it's a dark gray, color to white, and then let's set a transition of this so it's nice and smooth to about 0.5 seconds. And then let's just make the border radius about 50%, so it's nice and rounded. So if we hover over this, you can see we get the exact same as animation from the original document, and all we really needed is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bits of styling, and we've created this animation. So really simple stuff, and it just looks really cool. So let's now create this second animation bar. So we're going to go underneath example 1, so still inside the flex container, and I'm going to say example 2. Then underneath this, I'm just going to have a H1, which is going to say example 2. Again, this is just for consistency. And then I'm going to go underneath this. Now the markup for the second animation is a bit more complicated than the first animated search bar. That's because it involves a few more properties, symbols and values that you might not be familiar with, but I will explain these as I'm going along. So the first thing we need is an input. Now instead of type text, we have a type of check box, And the reason we have a type of checkbox is because this has two states. So we've got the initial state, which you see here right now, and you can style this however you want. Then we click on this, we have a second state, and then we can style this however we want, and this is going to be the power of the animation. So that's why we have a type of checkbox. And then I'm just going to put an ID of here inside here, check. And the reason we're doing that is because we're going to use a label in a moment, and we want to link the input or the ID of check with that label. And then so underneath this, we're going to have the class of search bar, so a little bit different. It's just going to have a dash. So inside this we have an input, and then this is going to have a type of text, of course, and then a placeholder. So pretty much the same thing we have here. So what are you looking for? You guys can put anything you want inside your placeholders, but again, this is just for the example. Now we're going to have a label. And again, the reason we have a label is because we want to make this for the ID of check here. So this is for the ID of check. So we link these two elements together. So we're going to put the ID of check inside here. And once the label is checked and activated, the animation will appear. So that is why we're linking those two. Then we have the icon inside here. And this is going to have a fas.fa-search, hit tab. And that's all we need for the markup. So now we're going into this styling. So we're going to go inside the style sheet. I'm going to go underneath here, and I'm going to say search. Oh, not search, sorry. Example 2. So go underneath here. And the first thing I want to do right now is I want to grab that first input we created, and I want to use square brackets because I want to select the type of checkbox. So we're going to say type equals, and we're going to put type of checkbox because it is a checkbox. And now what we can do from here is style this anywhere we like. So this is the first state, and what I want to do at first is actually display this as none so we can't see it. So you see now the checkbox is no longer showing, so that's what this is essentially doing. We're grabbing this input and then we're grabbing the type of checkbox so we can style it. Now what I want to do is style the search bar, so I'm going to say search bar. And what I'm going to do is set this to a position of relative because we want the icon position absolute inside of this, so it always stays to the right. So underneath this position relative, I want to make the width of this search bar 60 pixels, the height of the search bar to be 60 pixels initially, and then let's make a transition in here so it's nice and smooth, so 0.5 seconds let's say. And again, let's just add some margin so we can separate the H1 and the content. This isn't necessary, but that's what we're doing with margin. Now I want to style the input, so style this input here. So search bar, input, and then I want to set the width of this to be 100% of its container. So currently right now it will shrink down to 60 pixels because that is the width of the search bar. Make sure the height is 100%, and then the border radius, we always want it to be rounded, so I'm going to say 20 pixels. Border, so we're just going to remove the default settings here, so we don't want a border on here. I don't want the outline, so if we click on it, you see we get the outline. I don't want that, get rid of that, so none. Font size, let's make that about 20 pixels. And let's make the color of it black, and let's just add some padding left to this so the input moves slightly to the left, and then let's just add a transition, so make it a nice smooth transition. And then we don't actually want to see this right now, so we're going to make the opacity to 0. So by default the opacity is 1, so if we have a 1, you'll see the whole thing. If I do 0.5, it becomes a bit more transparent. You can still see it, but it's a bit more see-through. And then obviously 0 is completely transparent and we no longer could see it, but it is still there. So after that, I want to style the label. So it's going to be the icon section. So grab search bar and grab the label. And this is what we're going to position absolute. And we want it to be always on the right, so we're going to say right 0, so it's always positioned to the right when the animation occurs. And we want the width of this pretty much to be the same as the search bar, so width and height of 60 pixels, 60 not 0. And then let's just add a bit of line height here. Let's say about 60 pixels. Get that border radius in there, so 50 pixels for that. So we're pretty much just going to make the icon the exact same as example 1 to begin with. So that's currently what we're doing. So I want the text align to the center. You see the icon now moves more centrally. And then let's just put a cursor to a pointer. And let's give this a background of white. And then all we need to do now is just make the icon bigger. So remember, to make the icon actually bigger, we need font size. So let's say font size 40 pixels. And you can see now it's pretty much the exact same as example 1. Now we're done with the general styling. What we need to do from here is style the check state. Because remember when I said within the input type of checkbox, this has 2 states. So we need to style the second state. Now to style the second state, I'm just going to grab the ID of that input, which is check, and then use a pseudo class of checked. And now we can start styling the second state. Now to create the animation, we won't be able to just insert a search bar here because this isn't a direct child of the input. This is actually a sibling. So to write it out like this won't actually work. We need a CSS combinator, and in this example we're going to be using the plus CSS combinator, and this is just an adjacent sibling combinator that is used to select an element that's directly after another specific element. So this search bar is directly after this input of siblings. Now all I need to do from here is just add a width, so I'm going to say 500 pixels, and all we need to do from here is just change the opacity of the input to 1. So just grab this underneath here. And we don't need a CSS combinator here because we're going inside the search bar and grabbing the input. And all we need to do is just set the opacity to 1. And you can see now the search bar appears. If I click on the icon here, it will close off to the original state. If I click on it again, it will open up and show us the search bar with a nice cool animation. And those are the 2 different ways you can create animated search bar, guys. Really cool animations which you can use in your projects. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button and please consider subscribing. If you guys have any questions, leave them down below, and I'll see you guys next time.